Virginia Tech has the Commonwealth Cup and its next football coach. What went wrong for UVA and where do the Who's go from here? All that, football championship games, some television contract news, and plenty of ACC basketball. This week on Teel and Barber. Welcome in to the 69th episode of Teel and Barber, the Richmond Times-Dispatch and Richmond.com's Virginia Tech, UVA, and ACC sports podcast. I'm Mike Barber, ACC beat writer for the paper, and joining to chat here with me, as always, my co-host, the 13-time Sports Writer of the Year and the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, David Teel. And David, normally we spend a little time with small talk, but man, there is a lot going on in the world of sports, in the world of college football, and right here in the ACC and in the Commonwealth. So let's get right to it. And one of the good news items for the morning, the ACC network will finally be available to Comcast subscribers. I can't tell you because I haven't counted how many emails, tweets I've received over the last 2 years from angry fans missing UVA games, missing Tech games, and it felt like missing all of the ones between each other as almost a stick it to you to the fans who had no access. David, this deal is something that's been on Jim Phillips' radar, the new ACC commissioner. How did it finally get done, and what does it mean going forward?
Well, it's certainly a win for the 20 million Comcast subscribers. It's the nation's largest television provider. Now, obviously, all 20 million homes are not ACC homes, but the network will now be available nationwide in nearly 90 million homes. That full distribution will be a financial windfall for the conference, perhaps as upward of a 30% increase in television revenue because of subscription fees that cable providers pay. And it's been a long time coming, but not that big of a surprise in the delay. The launch of the network was in August of 2019 with the full knowledge that Disney's agreement with Comcast to carry Disney's portfolio did not expire until this fall. Now, the one problem was I think most of us expected that the network would be available this football season. But alas, no, the deal doesn't get done until after the football season, the third that the network has been unavailable to Comcast subscribers. And we still don't know exactly when it will be available. Today's release was very vague, saying details will be in the coming weeks.
Yeah, so maybe a little more waiting. But if you've waited 3 years, what's a couple more weeks, right, of waiting? I think historically it will be a minor footnote, but I know that for the 2.5, 3 years of waiting, it's been just agony for a lot of fans. I mean, I've got one reader who emails me weekly, and he always says, I know you'll report it when there's something, but can you tell me, are you still looking? Is there anything happening with the ACC network deal? And I got to the point where I finally dropped Comcast and went with Hulu. I stream my cable now because I couldn't wait any longer. So, but happy for everybody that finally got done. And when you tune into ACC Network to watch Virginia Tech football next year, you're going to see a new face on the sideline. David, Brent Pry, the defensive coordinator at Penn State, is becoming the Hokies' next football coach. He has some Virginia Tech ties. He was a GA under Frank Beamer in Blacksburg in the mid to late 90s. He does not have any prior head coaching experience. Overall, what do we make of this hire?
Well, like all new coaches, it's a very intriguing one, Mike, because you never know where these things are going to lead and end. And there's no telling what Whit Babcock, the Hokies AD, had to navigate through, given the seismic coaching changes elsewhere in the country, with Brian Kelly going to LSU and Lincoln Riley to Southern California and Billy Napier, perhaps a Virginia Tech target, going to Florida. But Pry, he doesn't have head coaching experience, and Babcock's history said that he would hire someone with that experience. But Mike, this is becoming more and more common that Power 5 athletic directors are willing to hire football coaches who have never been the boss before. There are at least 4 coaches in each of the Power Five conferences whose first job as a head coach was at the Power Five level. And here's just a few of them: Dabo Sweeney, Jimbo Fisher, Pat Narduzzi, Dave Aranda, Lincoln Riley, Mike Gundy, our mutual friend Shane Beamer, Ryan Day, James Franklin at Penn State, for whom Brent Pry worked, David Shaw at Stanford, Kirby Smart at Georgia, the number one team in the country, Bob Stoops at Oklahoma before Lincoln Riley, Bob's brother Mark at Kentucky. There are 7 alone in the SEC where it matters more, right, to the SEC.
That's what they tell us.
Yes. So as much as people might harp on this and say, hey, he's unproven, granted, he is, but this is more and more the way administrators are going.
It's interesting to me that they went the coordinator route. They went the coordinator route with a guy, without the head coaching experience, but that Pry is a guy who does have that connection to Blacksburg. And in the release, they announced that J.C. Price will be staying on. His exact role is kind of to be determined. It said, I believe, associate head coach and defensive coach. Obviously, J.C.'s background is with the defensive line.
Yeah.
He's had some run game coordinator, some co-coordinator type responsibilities. I think the point was to keep J.C. Price and then figure out exactly what his role will be. How important do you think, and we'll learn more Thursday, I think, obviously at the introductory press conference when we go down to Blacksburg, but how important do you think that Blacksburg connection was?
I think it might have been the difference in Brent Pry getting the job, Mike. As you said, we'll learn more Thursday, but my understanding from sources is that 2 coordinators became front and center in this search. I don't know who the other one was. We could speculate and say might have been Marcus Freeman, the Notre Dame defensive coordinator. Don't know. Might have been Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator at Michigan. Might it have been Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator at Alabama, who has been obviously a head coach at Penn State.
Well, and the one I had heard at the same time as Pry was Joe Moorhead at Oregon, who has head coaching experience. And my sources told me it had come down to Pry and Moorhead. I don't know. I don't know if that will ever be confirmed. Witt's not big on going back and walking us through the process, but yeah, I think with where you're going is what makes it Pry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think not only that the Hokies connection, but his daddy is a coach or was a coach, including as an assistant at VMI, where Brent Pry went to Lexington High School and played some football. So he knows the I-81 corridor. He has recruited the DMV quite well. And I was talking to Ricky Ronnie today, the Old Dominion coach. And Ronnie and Pry worked together for 9 years under James Franklin at Vanderbilt and at Penn State. And Ronnie told me that Pry used to talk about Bud Foster and Frank Beamer in Virginia Tech all the time. And how many times have we heard from fans over the last few weeks, Virginia Tech needs to find the football version of Mike Young? They just might have. Now, Mike Young came with a ton of head coaching experience, but he has those Southwestern Virginia roots. He had that affection, even though he didn't go to school there. He had that affection for Virginia Tech, having grown up going to Hokies games at Castle. Well, here's a guy who coached at Virginia Tech. Here's a guy who didn't land or isn't landing his first head coaching gig until his 50s. I think this could be, if it works, this could be his destination job. Ronnie was telling me today that Brent Pry is not a job chaser. That's why he's been with James Franklin for so long. He's had other opportunities, but decided they weren't right. So maybe they found the Mike Young of football. And if so, good on them.
Yeah, and if you remember, the Mike Young of basketball was named after the Frank Beamer of football, right? We said Frank Beamer, here he is, Frank Beamer in basketball shoes. So yeah, a great opportunity there. And it's interesting that you bring up Brent's age at 52, because one of the things that came to me in talking about this is, yes, there is head coaching experience. That's an important thing to have the big whistle, to make all those calls. As we saw with Justin Fuente, the adjustment of dealing with all the things that come with being a Power Five head coach, and all the other ways you're pulled away from the practice field, if you will. But Brent Pry is not a young guy who's inexperienced to big time college football.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a ton of experience. He's got years. He's got wisdom. He just didn't have that job title yet. I think that makes a big difference. And that's not to disparage some of the young and upcoming coaches, and we've seen coordinators get jobs in their early 40s, some in their late 30s, getting the opportunity depending on the time of the school. And I think that can work, but I think we mitigate some of the concern about, well, this guy's never been a head coach, with this guy's been in some pretty big places for a good number of years, and he's been in this business for a long time. So I'm not as worried about that. And I am very turned on, for lack of a better term, for what you hit on there, the recruiting fit.
Yeah.
For whatever the reason, the perception around Virginia Tech in the Justin Fuente era was that they didn't emphasize Virginia recruiting. Now, we talked in previous episodes, I think that might have been more perception than reality.
Agreed.
But it was certainly the way it was received, the way they marketed, Texas to VT and dominating Carolina. I think the Pry hire signals, again, for perception's sake, the idea of we start in Virginia and move out from there. And I think that's an important turn and element to this hire.
I agree. And I saw some folks, our mutual friends at Tech Sideline, and Andy Bitter at The Athletic, screenshotting some of Brent Pry's best recruiting gets over the years at Penn State. And many of them were Hokies targets here in the Commonwealth.
Right.
I mean, Penn State is one of those schools that has come down here and landed a good amount of talent. And it'll be his job to stop that pipeline.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to watch that, because emphasizing something and doing it are two different things, right? So Brent Pry can come in with a great track record recruiting Virginia, recruiting the 757 in particular. We've seen some of those prospects. But was it Brent Pry or was it Penn State? Was it the recruiter? Was it Ohio State? Was it the recruiter?
Yeah.
Was it Notre Dame? What was it that is pulling kids out of Virginia? But at least it does feel like there's an emphasis on this going forward. I think that's going to be important. We talked about the defense, retaining Coach Price and Pry's time with Bud, some of the things he did at Penn State. I think we have a fairly good vision of what defense may look like. Offensively, David, is the big question. Fans, and the longer I do this job, the more I realize that there isn't a fan base in America that doesn't hate its offensive coordinator and think his play calls are ridiculous. I mean, Robert and I at UVA put together one of the most explosive offenses in the nation, and people want him hung in effigy, if not in reality. What do you think Tech is going to do offensive coordinator-wise, and how much is Whit Babcock prepared to spend to bring in somebody who's really at the top of that part of the profession?
Excellent questions, Mike. I wish I could give you precise answers. I asked Ricky Ronnie that question today about Pry. Do you have any idea of whom he might look at in terms of a staff? And Ricky didn't give me any names, but he just assured me that Brent Pry is very well connected across the country, and he believes he will assemble a top shelf staff. I think what's going to help him, and I have talked to some people today at Virginia Tech, is that the Hokies are prepared to significantly increase pay for assistant coaches and significantly increase the recruiting staff. And that will be a serious asset for a new head coach, especially one who is a rookie.
Yeah, that's an interesting, we don't want to go back and relitigate the Justin Fuente era, but yeah, I know Virginia Tech was moving in that direction. It just seems like some of these promises we always get for the new coaches, where were they with 2 years left in the Fuente era, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And it just, and I get it, now you're competing, and you're trying to attract a coach, and maybe other people are trying to get that same guy, and you want to energize your fan base by showing a commitment. But I just imagine there's a lot of coaches across the country who look at the details around their replacements and think, where was this? Where was this pledge? Where was this commitment in my later years? Might that have turned things around? But it's good information and good insight, David, because I think when fans heard he's a defensive coordinator, the first thought was, okay, who's going to run the offense? And that's been
Yeah.
such a
And
point of focus.
and how, how's this for small world stuff? Brent Pry's head coaching debut will be
Yeah, isn't that fantastic? Against Old Dominion and Ricky Ronnie. I just think that we saw it in Major League Baseball, right? With Max Scherzer going to the Mets, and who do they play on opening day? They play the Nats. It's an aside, but I love when sports gives us those wrinkles.
Yeah, and the game is in Norfolk. And I was joking with Ronnie today, and he said, I've got to make sure there's more Old Dominion fans in the stadium than Virginia Tech fans.
It is going to be quite the scene, and we all remember what happened the last time Tech went to Old Dominion, and you can survive it, certainly, but I think Brent Pry would really like to get off to a little bit of a better start there, and it will be.
And here's a little tip that just hit my phone. That game, it's opening weekend, and right now is scheduled for Saturday. Don't be surprised if that game gets moved to a Friday night for television purposes.
Yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to it a lot more now, and it'll be interesting to hear more. And I know you talked to Ricky Ronnie, just kind of that relationship, and that's going to be a dynamic recruiting too, because I think ODU has made some strides to close the gap, and we've seen Tech slip a bit. I think those two old friends may run into each other a little more than Brent Pry would like early on, especially in the 757 area. Now, Brent Pry is taking over a team that just scored a pretty significant win under the interim coach, J.C. Price. And, we're impartial in this business, and there are people we really like at UVA and people we really like at Virginia Tech. But I think it's fair to say that, at least I know I was very happy for J.C. Price. I thought that was a great moment for him, winning the Commonwealth Cup in a really exciting game against Virginia at Scott Stadium, a game where, as always, the stadium, even though it was UVA's home stadium, there were plenty of Tech fans there. I thought it was a good atmosphere. I don't know if it was a great game in terms of quality of execution.
No.
But it was a great game in terms of entertainment value. And I thought both teams played hard, really wanted it. And the video that's circulating online of J.C. Price after the game finding his family on the field. Again, you go back to what we love about sports. I think that's one of those what we love about sports moments, man. I mean, watching him, picking up his daughters and the look on his face and how proud he was. David, that was a fun game to cover, wasn't it?
Oh, it absolutely was. And you mentioned the Price family, and of course JC's wife Jenny is a former Hokies athlete herself, and it's just a Virginia Tech family through and through. You could see it in Price's post-game interview with ESPN, ACCN, and you could tell it in post-game with us. And just the raw emotion of winning that game, and then his tweet about smoking a cigar back in '95 after winning at Scott Stadium, and then again on Saturday. And hey, it extends his interim head coaching tenure one more game, and it might, we don't know yet, it might conclude just a few miles from J.C. Price's Maryland roots. It could end up in Annapolis at the Military Bowl.
Yeah, another fun wrinkle. And I think also, just a huge win because, Brent Pry can now come in and get to see these players. Yes. The release seemed to indicate, and this is usually the case, that Coach Price will finish out leading the way this season, and the coaching staff as it is will most likely, assuming those guys don't get other jobs and leave, will continue as is. But the opportunity for the new coach to come in and just watch practice, just put eyes on guys. And I think that's going to be really useful and helpful for them. Let's start with Virginia Tech in this game, and some really good stuff, I thought. We've talked about they played hard for J.C. Price. I don't think either of us are surprised. I think we knew with his passion for the rivalry that would happen. David, they ran the football really well. They ran the football the way they ran it in the first half of the North Carolina game. Raheem Blackshear was great. Man, if they could have done that more of the year, things might have been different, huh?
You don't get to play against Virginia's defense every week.
No, don't they wish they could?
Right? I mean, Mike, Virginia Tech in its first 11 games had 2 scrimmage plays of more than 50 yards. Both of them Braxton Burmeister to Trey Turner completions against Georgia Tech. Those were the only 2. Yeah. On Saturday, Virginia Tech had 3 such plays.
Yeah. Had a 50-yard run from Blackshear, a 61-yard touchdown for Tavian Robinson, and then that 71-yard run, I believe, for Braxton Burmeister. And it's been the bugaboo of the UVA defense all year, but kudos to Virginia Tech for being able to exploit that.
No question. I thought Virginia Tech's offensive line was excellent. You mentioned Blackshear. I mean, he was terrific all game. What I didn't understand was why Virginia Tech kept going to Connor Blumrick when Burmeister was running it so well himself. And the 4th and 2, was it 4th and 2 or 3rd and 2 with the quarterback sneak was just a preposterous call, especially when Blackshear was averaging 11 yards a carry. So otherwise, I thought Brad Cornelson, he got that little gadget play in there, with the double reverse to Tavion Robinson, who the little left-hander throws a touchdown pass there in the left corner of the end zone to Braxton Burmeister.
Our friend Wes McElroy and John Laser have been referring to it as the Blacksburg special instead of the Philly special. And
Philly special.
The other weird one, because you're right, the quarterback shuffling did baffle me and might have cost them. If you remember the play,
fourth down.
Yeah, where Blumrick is in, it's 4th and goal. They don't run a power with him, which is what you think Blumrick's in for. They roll him out, and then they're asking him to throw, and Blackshear's wide open, but Blumrick can't get the ball to the right shoulder, and he ends up throwing a ball that's tough to catch. Blackshear can't handle it. It just seemed like if that's your play call, Burmeister is clearly your quarterback. But hey, they survived, and in the end, they scored more. So I guess kudos to them in that regard. And David, I thought the defense, considering who they were facing, and I know Armstrong, we'll get into that in a second, hurt the ankle and maybe wasn't 100%, but I thought the defense acquitted itself well in this one.
Very much so in the second half, Mike.
Yeah.
3 second-half points.
Yeah, I guess a team that was, just slinging it all over the yard on everybody, even in the Pitt game, and Pitt, wins the Coastal and is going to the ACC title game against Wake. They couldn't stop Brennan Armstrong throwing the ball downfield. And however they accomplished it, and whatever factor the ankle was, I thought Virginia Tech did a real nice job in the second half in that regard.
Yes, I thought Jordan Williams up front at defensive tackle was exceptional. They really did a good job of keeping Brennan Armstrong within the confines of the pocket and not giving him running lanes. You mentioned that late Armstrong was probably limited by the ankle. And then in the secondary, Tay Daly, he had some pass breakups. He had a pick. He had the pass breakup on Virginia's final play there in the end zone on 4th down. Not a great throw, but he made sure it was not going to get caught. And Shamari Connor was good, and Jermaine Waller unavailable. They did this without their best corner.
Yeah, I think and that segues into the UVA talk, I think if you're UVA, you've got to be disappointed with what you did offensively in such a big game and a big moment. And the defense was terrible all year, and I don't think we were surprised that it struggled or gave up big plays against Tech. In fact, we talked about it last week that this had more of the earmarkings of a shootout than Virginia suddenly getting its defense right. And the whole idea of the battle of week on week with Tech's offense and UVA's defense, and Tech's offense certainly grabbing the edge, but the offense just was okay. It wasn't the explosive 35, 40-point a game attack that it's been all season. What went wrong, or was it just simply Tech playing well?
No, I think a lot went wrong, and they should have been better. Armstrong wasn't as good. Was it the injury? He'll never use it as an excuse. And of course, they were positioned right there at the end to steal it after Blumrick fumbled the ball away. Again, what's he doing in the game? But, because Virginia Tech has a chance to run the clock out after that bizarre onside kick. I'm not sure what that was all about. I'm not sure why Virginia didn't kick it away on the free kick following the safety. But, there Virginia is at the 12-yard line going ready to score the winning touchdown down 5. And then came a play that'll probably be on Robert and I's tombstone.
Yeah, and David, for everything we just talked about, the questionable goal line calls for Tech, the questionable quarterback rotation, some of the other things they did, no one is going to remember that, because when you talk about weird and bad play calls in this game, it was the third down tackle throwback to Bobby Haskins, and that's nothing against Bobby Haskins, but just think about what you've got situationally in terms of your personnel. You've got Brennan Armstrong, maybe been the best quarterback all year in the ACC. Certainly Kenny Pickett, Sam Hartman, Devin Leary. A lot of guys can lay a claim to that this year. But Brennan Armstrong is your weapon. You've got the deepest and most talented receiving core you've had in the Bronco tenure. And you've got all the different kind of pieces. You got the small, quick guys. You got the leaping guys. You got Jelani Woods, who is 8'6", and I can complete passes to him. It just felt like maybe that's a great play call if you're trying to steal something because you're inferior. It just felt like with that offense, why take the ball out of the hands of those guys?
And why do it when what was it, 3rd and 8?
3rd and 8, and they end up throwing 6 or 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Yes, he's not going to.
Right, even if it quote unquote works, he ain't going 15 yards to the end zone.
No,
it's just not happening.
He absolutely is not. And, Bronco Mendenhall can tap dance around this all he wants. Oh, it works in practice. Yada, yada. I'll bet it doesn't work from there. If it does, bad on your defense.
Well, I was going to say, I wouldn't use it works in practice with that defense as justification for anything.
No.
Right? That's the most amazing thing about Brennan Armstrong's statistics this year is he did it without the benefit of playing Virginia's defense. Imagine what his numbers would be if he was on a different team and got to do that against Virginia's defense. They point to the Orange Bowl in Florida when it quote unquote worked, but it got called back for a penalty. Well, in my book, it didn't work.
Of course it didn't.
It got called back for a penalty. It didn't work. And again, it's not about the play or the design or even the timing. It's about what you chose it over for me, right? You could have picked Michael Jordan, but who'd you pick, right? You had Brendan Armstrong with all these weapons and all these ways to attack, and instead you did something funky and quirky. And let's be honest, it's been a great offense all year, and Robert and I has put together just an explosive attack. But every game, once or twice, he does something that leaves us scratching our heads. And to do it in that situation and to take the fate of your team out of Brendan Armstrong's hands, to me, I'll never, they can tell me why they did it 1,000 times. I'll never understand.
No, and Mike, I said it half jokingly, but what did I say to you in the press box Saturday after Tavion Robinson threw that touchdown pass to Burmeister? I told you, watch Nye try to one-up
hold my beer,
Brad Cornelson.
And he sure did at the worst possible moment. And who knows how it ends the other way. But this Virginia team, the model of this Virginia team is we're going to live and die with Brendan Armstrong, right? I mean, that's why they left him in blowout games getting hit, because Brendan Armstrong's our guy. It's why they were able to win close games in Miami and Louisville. I mean, that Louisville comeback, Brendan Armstrong's our guy. It's why they struggled so much when he missed a game. Brendan Armstrong's our guy. And here you are in your rivalry. Let Brendan Armstrong be the guy. And I think that's got to be, no matter what they say, and they'll never say it publicly, that's got to be a play call they want back.
Yes. But you know what? It would go a long way with the base.
Yeah, right.
To concede, not the best decision.
Right. Yeah. We watched it on film. The more we thought about it, That was a mistake. We should have left the ball in the hands of our best player. And, fans are going to be upset, and we're going to get into that here in a moment. But, yeah, just own it. Like, stop defending, because when you defend a bad play call like that, it leaves fans with that sinking feeling that you're going to do it again.
Yeah.
And UVA fans, they don't have the patience to see that again. If they make it through this, they don't want to see it again. What they also don't want to see again at UVA is a swarm of Virginia Tech fans rushing the field at Scott Stadium. And we talked about what a cool moment it was for J.C. Price, but that's the epitome of a gut punch if you're the home team. David, what did you think of Hokie fans storming the field at Scott Stadium?
Given the whole vibe of the game and the fact that Virginia Tech was a 7-point underdog, which is the largest spread in Virginia's favor since at least 1995. That's how far back this one database I use goes. So that plus bowl eligibility, everything, the whole interim coach thing, a Hokie coaching the Hokies. Have at it, man. Rush the field.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am 100% in favor of it for all of those reasons, and for the simple reason that, and this goes back to, I remember in high school, we had a game, a JV game, where we felt as players like the other team was running up the score because they were bigger and better. And I think there was some grumbling post-game in the locker room, and our coach, who was a former lineman at Oklahoma State, kind of snarled at us and said, don't let them score if you don't like it. Don't let them come to your stadium and win if you don't like it. And if you're the fans who have a big problem with this, sell out your stadium.
Yeah.
Show up. If you only leave the Virginia Tech allotment for tickets, which is up in the stands, they're not running on your field. But if you're only going to fill 60% of your stadium, I've been around this state long enough to tell you, Tech fans will go ahead and fill in some of those empty seats. And then when they beat you in dramatic fashion, they may run on the field. And their 27th year senior, Tyrell Smith, he may stick a flag in the middle of your logo. That might be what happens if you leave those seats open as fans and you lose the game as players. That's how it goes. So, it's anything that adds juice to an already juicy rivalry. Obviously, us sports writers are for. But, to me, that was them celebrating a win that I think salvaged their season. And that brings us neatly to this week's edition of Who You Got.
Thank you, Mike. After all is said and done, Virginia Tech and UVA finished with identical 6-6 records. The Hokies kept the Commonwealth Cup, but fired their coach. Brennan Armstrong and Dontavion Wicks had record-setting years for Virginia, but the Cavaliers ended the regular season on a 4-game losing streak. So, who you got? Who had the better season? Let's start with David.
Guys, this is an easy call. Identical 6-6, 4-4 ACC records. Comes down to head. And the game that both these programs point to annually. And not only did Virginia Tech win, it won in Charlottesville to secure bowl eligibility. Virginia Tech, coaching change notwithstanding, had the better season.
Thank you, David. Mike?
Well, it's hard to argue, but for argument's sake, I will. And I will say this. 5 years from now, if I think back to this season, I think I'm going to remember two things. I'm going to remember Brennan Armstrong and the amazing offense, and I'm going to remember that Virginia Tech fired its coach with 2 weeks to go. Which one of those is positive? Which one of those is negative? I'm going to say that Virginia had the better season because really what I'm saying, David, is Virginia's offense had the better season. I think that it's funny because they are 6-6 and Tech did win the game, but the vibe I get from Virginia is pretty good team, disappointing finish. And the vibe I get from Virginia Tech was bad team, pulled it out with something nice at the end. So by the slimmest of margins, and not pretending that either one had a very good season, I'll give the edge to the Cavaliers. And that brings us to the big picture at UVA, which is something that if you're a Twitter aficionado and you're out there on the social media stuff, you're seeing there are some angry UVA fans. They're angry at the coaches. They're angry at the defensive coaches. They're angry at the play calling by Robert Anai. They're angry at the big picture for Bronco Mendenhall. I get it, especially when you lose to your rival and all the things we just talked about. But David, I'm looking at Bronco Mendenhall's tenure so far, and I'm looking at what was there before. And they went to one bowl game in 8 years before hiring Bronco, and they've been bowl eligible in 5 of his 6. Are things that bad in Charlottesville right now?
They're never as bad as fans would lead you to believe, nor as good as fans would lead you to believe. But yes, there are troubling signs here. A 6-6 season with a record-setting quarterback, as you wrote after the game, is almost a waste. You have this guy who leads the country in total offense. He is smashing school and conference single-season production records, and yet you can't do enough around him to win more games. Now, granted, 3 of Virginia's closing 4 losses were against nationally ranked teams in Brigham Young and Pitt and Notre Dame. So there is that. And previously, they lost to Wake Forest, which is 10-2 and going to the ACC championship game. And the other loss was to, yes, a 6-6 North Carolina team, but one with a first-round draft choice at quarterback in Sam Howell. So the schedule was challenging. But this is not the unbroken growth that Bronco Mendenhall has aspired to with this program. And I would not be surprised at all if there are some changes in the program.
Now, when you say changes, the defense has been bad for 2 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
They adjusted scheme-wise. They played more of that 3-3-5, dropped 8 more to try to stop giving up big plays. What happened? They got gashed in the run game, readjusted, and then at times got gashed with the big pass plays again. They have not solved the defensive problems. Do you anticipate changes on the coaching staff this offseason?
Yes. No inside information. It's just kind of the way these things work. Now, Bronco Mendenhall is different, and these are his guys. So maybe he doubles down. Maybe he reassigns responsibilities again. I don't know. But I do expect some change. And if there isn't, the base will be further irritated. And Mike, you mentioned the crowd on Saturday. I thought it was poor. I really did. I'll bet you if you count Turnstile, I'll bet you there weren't 40,000 people.
Yeah, which should never happen.
And I know these are 2 mediocre teams, but if that's the way you roll against your rival, then there's apathy, and something's got to change there.
Well, and that's the thing is I have a hard time reconciling fans who all of a sudden want Bronco run out of town or want his defensive coaches who, like you said, have played for him, GA'd for him, coached for him. I don't think they're going anywhere. You may see a situation where Bronco gets more involved on the defensive side and they shuffle some responsibilities, but I don't see a big change coming. They're Bronco guys, and it reminds me a little bit of Fuente and Cornelson. I think those are the personalities you're going to have and how they divvy it up. But what my point was, I struggle to reconcile fans that suddenly want this guy out or have these major concerns and angst over their coach. I don't know that they're all showing up on game day. And the other thing they're not showing up, David, is donations. Because when Bronco was hired, there was a lot of talk about what he was promised in terms of facility upgrades. There is a plan in place for a new football facility, for upgrades throughout that will elevate the program to be more competitive in the ACC. You just talked about what Tech is now promising Pry after their hiring of him. We haven't seen these facility upgrades. They're on hold. So we've got a fan base that seems to want to be angry and fired up, but not put their money where their mouth is when it comes to showing up on game day or writing the checks that make your program competitive.
It's a very fair point. And Bronco Mendenhall talked at his introductory press conference about the need for facility enhancements. I was with Carla Williams, the athletic director at UVA, when Jim Phillips, the new ACC commissioner, toured the grounds and the facilities. And she was showing him and telling him, look, this is how far behind we are. Our weight room is unacceptable. Our meeting space is unacceptable. This has got to be better. This has got to be better. I mean, she knows it. Bronco Mendenhall knows it. And yet here we are 6 years into his tenure. And now there are more practice fields. Granted, that's a good step. But otherwise, the infrastructure has not improved. And, at what point does frustration set in for Bronco
Yes.
Mendenhall? But on the flip side, the fans are saying, well, we want to see results. And yes, we won a Coastal and we went to the Orange Bowl. But otherwise, what have you done for us lately? That's how fans are.
And that's what I think is unfair, in that he went and did more with less. At that point, they should have gotten on track fundraising wise. When in 2019, when he won the Coastal, when he went to the Orange Bowl, that was saying, look, I've squeezed everything I can squeeze out of this. Look what I can do. Now give me what I need. And they didn't. And I just think fans who are griping about Bronco Mendenhall, they ought to think twice, because could I see a scenario where he throws his hands up and says, the hell with this? Well, Bronco probably wouldn't say the heck with this, and wants out and goes somewhere where they're going to support him facility-wise, now that he's proven he can at least be competitive with less at the Power 5 level. Yeah, I'd be careful what you say and complain about Bronco Mendenhall, because he may look around and say, look, if he's got a vision and a plan for UVA, but if it's not feasible, if he's not going to get the support that he was promised, he can go somewhere else with that plan. And I got to be honest, my money's on Bronco. I think he has a good plan. I think he knows what has to be done. I think it's impressive that he's gotten Virginia already to the point where nobody's excited or satisfied by bowl eligibility every year, because, David, when I moved to Virginia, that wasn't the case, right? They were coming down from success and we're going into a long period of nothing. So be careful what you wish for, is my point on the football side. Now,
sure. Let me just add one thing, Mike, because you mentioned taking advantage of the Orange Bowl appearance from a fundraising standpoint. But what happened 2 months after that Orange Bowl? Pandemic.
There were certainly some timing things there.
Yeah.
That throws everything off. But we're still seeing, Virginia Tech, they had their cuts, their rollbacks, but they're still in position now, apparently, to support Brent Pry in a way that it does not appear UVA is positioned to support Bronco Mendenhall. And that's a concern. And hey, you can do more with less. And Bronco's shown it. And another guy who's shown it, who we think was a pretty serious target for Virginia Tech, Dave Clawson at Wake Forest. They're upping their support. They're ramping up what they're putting into that program at Wake Forest. But Clawson has built this thing in the do more with less model. And now he gets Pittsburgh in the ACC title game. And David, I think that's as impressive a coaching turnaround as we've seen in some time.
Yeah, if he's not ACC Coach of the Year, then I'm in the wrong biz, right?
Yeah, that was an easy part of the ballot.
Yeah, it really was. What he's done there, Mike, is remarkable. And this is the first ACC championship game to match two teams averaging at least 40 points a game. I think it's going to be really fun. And Wake Forest facilities are good and getting better. And as experienced as this group is, this Deacons group, Dave Clawson reminded us Sunday on a Zoom that 54 of Wake's scholarship players are underclassmen, freshmen or sophomores. He's got a foundation there, and clearly he believes in it, or he wouldn't have signed that contract extension.
Yeah, I think he could have gone somewhere. I think.
Oh, he absolutely could have,
including potentially to Blacksburg. And I think that he showed a commitment to Wake. Wake showed the support that he needs, and it'll be interesting to see if the same thing happens for Bronco. That title game is going to be fun. Kenny Pickett, Sam Hartman, they ended up being first and second team all ACC at quarterback. And I think Brendan Armstrong had a good case to be in one of those spots too, but no denying how good those two guys are. It should be a fun one to watch.
Yeah. I believe so. And no playoff spot on the line for the first time in the playoff era for the ACC, but still, to me, a pretty compelling title game.
Yeah, well, so we're at where we're at with Virginia, a disappointing season. We're at where we're at with Virginia Tech, a disappointing season. But now we turn the page, right, for these guys and two basketball programs that have a chance to be pretty good. Virginia didn't look that way in the first half last night against Iowa. David, you and I were there, and we joked about, I had family in town from Thanksgiving, and last night was their last night in town, but I chose to come out to the game and work instead of taking the night off. And as they were falling behind by 20 points, you were kind of looking at me like maybe I should have taken taking the night off and had one more night with family. But boy, David, that second half made it worth rolling out. What do we make of the cliche tale of two halves, and what do we take away from it?
Well, I think the big question moving forward, well, there are two questions. Can Virginia sustain the second half urgency it showed against Iowa last night over a complete 40 minutes? Number one. Number two, is Tane Murray going to be instant offense for the rest of the season? Because, wow, what an impressive looking stroke that is. A confident stroke. And if he can be that guy off the bench, Tony Bennett may have found him something.
Yeah, I think that Tane Murray has the chance down the road to be a Sam Hauser type player. I did not anticipate that level of impact and confidence. David, he did not play in either game in Newark. Didn't get off the bench. He played 3 minutes in the blowout against Lehigh. He's a freshman from overseas. If ever there was a candidate for a guy to be like, well, shoot, this isn't working out, that's a great moment right there for him to say, maybe this isn't working out. And instead, ton of credit to the guy who does not strike you as a kid. When he came in the post game, and he played with pros in New Zealand,
Right.
he strikes you as a very mature, very polished. But I'm just really impressed with that. And if you don't follow UVA basketball closely, you don't understand that Tony Bennett's press conference was as close to him ripping his team
Yep.
as you're going to get. Tony Bennett's not going to come in and just throw guys under the bus and call guys. It's not Tony. It's not the way he does it. He might do it in practice. He gets on him good. We've all heard the stories of that, but he isn't going to come into a press conference and blast his guys. That was as close as he's going to come to doing it. What he said was, we couldn't play certain guys in the second half because they didn't have the alertness, the intensity, and the engagement to be trusted. That's getting ripped by Tony Bennett. When he says you showed up not ready to play, that's him ripping you. And I thought, even though he's Tony Bennett and he can handle bad moments with grace, that's just who he is, I thought he was salty. I thought he was ticked off. And I'm going to be really curious what they come out with against Pittsburgh.
He was having no part of, gee, coach, isn't it great you came from 21 down and led late?
Right.
He was like, nope, not going there.
Yeah.
He was all kinds of frosted at that early effort and the slow closeouts and the failures to do what he considers fundamental things defensively. So I believe that the practices in preparation for Pittsburgh on Friday are going to be a little rough.
Yeah, I would not specifically want to be Francisco Cafaro or Cody Statman, who did not play any minutes in the second half. And again, Bennett's personality, he didn't call them out by name, but we're all capable of reading, and we're all capable of reading who played 6 or 7 minutes in the first half and 0 minutes in the second half. And it wasn't foul trouble and it wasn't matchups. So those gentlemen may be in for a long week behind closed doors at JPJ. On the other side of things, Virginia Tech, they lost a pair of, I thought, very competitive games in Brooklyn. They face Maryland tonight. We're recording this here Tuesday afternoon.
I think it's tomorrow, Mike.
Did I mix that up? That's quite possible. The days are starting to blend together. But what do we make right now of what Virginia Tech has and what they were able to do against Memphis and Xavier, or what they weren't able to do?
It's something we've mentioned quite a bit. One is the lack of depth. I thought that hurt up in Brooklyn. And Keve Aluma did not play well. And that's when your top gun is struggling and you don't have a lot of depth, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, and I think there are great pieces around Keve Aluma, but I think they are pieces that essentially play through him, right? Like Naheem Aline, I think, can be an electrifying scorer, especially when people are collapsing down to Aluma and giving him a lot of space to operate. And, Murphy as a distributor, and Hunter Couture certainly is a great catch and shooter, come around a screen, shoot. They've got good pieces, but it does feel like it all has to be working for them to be at that level. Now, I think they can beat plenty of people, with 2 or 3 of those cylinders firing, but ranked teams, that kind of a stage. I think those tests exposed, where Virginia Tech still needs work. Hokies open ACC play Saturday against Wake Forest. UVA gets going in league play Friday night against Pitt. And that brings us to this week's edition of Who You Got.
Thank you, Mike. After its win over Gonzaga, Duke is the number one team in the nation and clearly the class of the ACC. So, if the rest of the league is playing for second place, who is the best of the rest? Who you got? Let's start with Mike.
Yeah, that's a good question because, David, I think you'll agree with me that maybe more than we anticipated, the gap between where Duke is and where everybody else is pretty substantial. I think I went in, and we've talked about this on the show. We think that Mike Krzyzewski might have a team that can win it all for him in his last year. So we're both really high on Duke. I was a little higher on some of the teams behind them, and they may still put it together. I've got Florida State still. I came into the year thinking they were number 2, just ahead of Carolina. I still think they're there. I know they had the very lopsided loss at Florida that you don't love to see, and they had an equally lopsided win over Missouri, and I know that's not a great Missouri team. I think we're going to know a lot more about Florida State tonight after they play at Purdue.
Yeah, that's
right.
Really
that's a dandy.
Difficult game, yeah.
That's a dandy of a game, man. That's going to be one that I grab some snacks and I can't wait to watch. I think it's 7:30, Florida State at Purdue. Right now, before I see what they do, I've still got Leonard Hamilton's Seminoles, to me, as the second best team in an ACC, again, with a big gap between them and where Duke is right now.
You chose a team that plays soon against Purdue. I'm going to take a team that plays tomorrow night against Michigan in another really interesting ACC Big Ten Challenge game, and that's North Carolina. I picked the Tar Heels second in preseason, and like the Seminoles, the Tar Heels have had some disappointing results, lost to aforementioned Purdue and Tennessee on back-to-back days up in Connecticut at the Hall of Fame tip-off. But there's just an awful lot of talent on that roster that Hubert Davis has. And the transfer from Oklahoma and Manick, and obviously Armando Bacot being back. And let's not forget Justin McCoy, the transfer from UVA. I think the Tar Heels will get it together. And, home game against Michigan. Really a chance for them to pronounce themselves as a serious contender in the league.
Well, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch this ACC Big Ten Challenge. It's going to be fun to see where these football teams end up in bowl games. And I know people say, there's too many bowls, and ACC's got 10 teams eligible, and half of them are 6-6. So maybe there are too many bowls, but I think it's going to be fun to get one more football game. And David, you wrote about this in your column after the UVA Iowa game, and I want to end on this note because it's nice to end on something positive. I thought the feeling we got, the atmosphere, and this is what you wrote about, at JPJ in the second half against Iowa, really for the first time took us back to what a college basketball environment is supposed to feel like. And you wrote it well, so if you haven't read the column yet, it's on richmond.com still. But David, that was a good feeling to have that back.
Man, it sure was. I mean, you could just feel the fans. They were hoping and pleading and screaming. They were into every whistle, and they were at the edge of their seats with every shot. And it was only November, and neither team was ranked in the top 25. But this was high-level basketball. I mean, we're talking about a game that there were a combined 9 turnovers. I mean, it was really clean, and, it had flow to it, and the fans appreciated it. And Tony Bennett even mentioned the crowd afterwards as having contributed to Virginia's comeback. So, yeah, it was a privilege to be up there on our perch and just kind of feel that vibe again.
Yeah, this Thanksgiving season, that's something we can both be thankful for. We're thankful for you all listening. You can subscribe to Teel and Barber on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your favorite pods. And please, this holiday season, consider supporting local journalism with an online subscription to the TD. Makes a great gift, right? You can find special promotional offers available at richmond.com. Today's show was produced by Dean Hoffmeyer. Teel and Barber is a podcast of the Richmond Times-Dispatch and richmond.com. For David Teel, I'm Mike Barber. Thanks for listening. Be healthy and safe, and please join David and me again next time.